every week. And the beauty is we are live, which means you can interact with us. The phone lines are open. Give us a call, 979-59-MONEY. That is 979-596-6639. There's a lot of great financial programs that you can listen to over the weekend. Why I would say we might get a leg up on those other shows is that we are live. You can interact with us. So again, you can also text that line, 979-596-6639. You can send us emails, jeremiah@therealmoneypros.com. My colleague Alexandra Lundgren is here with me. You can also send her an email at alex@therealmoneypros.com as well. I'm excited to have this conversation today.
Yeah.
So we have a packed studio with some special guests that are so gracious to give us their time on a Saturday, especially when it's a beautiful day, spring's upon us, the sun is shining. It's great out there. But we have an important topic that we need to talk about. And selfishly, I got a bunch of questions that I need to hit on this, because if there's been one theme that I have recognized in conversations with my clients really over the past probably 2 to 3 years, just in my office, not meeting with a significant amount of people, but a pretty good number, a huge topic that comes up again and again and again is their aging parents and how will they cover the care for that potential long-term cost need. One of the biggest financial risks in America right now is not a stock market crash. It is the inevitability of getting old. And the reality is we have a aging population. So you have people that have spent decades building retirement, building their portfolios, paying off homes, maxing your 401ks. But the question really comes down to what happens if I can't take care of myself one day? And the reality is that there's conversations about long-term care and then a nursing. It's not just a nursing home conversation anymore. It's like people might need help at home. There might be memory care issues, assisted living, this, that, and everything in between. And I will say a bit of a scary part is that a lot of families do not have a plan or a protocol in place when. And it's almost not like an if. I think the probability is of when this situation is going to take place. Meaning, does someone need help with daily tasks for months or even years? So today we're going to dive into these looming long-term care challenges that arguably millions of Americans are facing or going to face, what these real costs look like, and what Medicaid and how Medicaid actually works. Like, this is going to be the real conversation today of the ins and outs, the myths, the protocol of Medicaid, and how you can use this tool, if you will, to get to your desired outcome, whether it's for you or your family or from an estate planning standpoint. So I'm excited to have Jessica Young, Brooke Baker with Navigate Legacy?
Legacy Navigation.
Legacy Navigate, said it backwards, here with us today. So we're going to go ahead, Alex.
And hopefully clarify for us the difference between Medicare, Medicaid, and how they actually can work together.
Right.
Yeah.
No, we got a lot of questions. So let's just jump right into it. Medicaid. There's so many myths around it, but if you were going to do the best job in the simplest form that you can, okay, of explaining what is Medicaid and what is its purpose, how most people would see it or view it. I mean, both of you could take a shot at this.
Okay. Well, traditionally speaking, what we deal with as far as Medicaid is the Medicaid Aged and Disabled waiver. So what that waiver is it's a waiver that protects or helps our senior citizens age 65 or older, or those who are disabled, get the care that they need and the resources to pay for those. So it's not the traditional Medicaid. It's not meant to be an impoverishment program. It's specifically designed to help our elderly, we all have aging parents, get on the benefits that they need or get the care that they need, mostly to remain at home independently, right? Because that's cheaper than using Medicaid or using a state benefit, but even then it covers them in the home. So that's essentially what we work with is the Medicaid Aged and Disabled waiver.
Jessica, what do you think? Give us your take. Well, I will say this. You both have an interesting background of how you've gotten into this. So, Jessica, correct me if I'm wrong, but your background before you started Legacy Navigate is you were a social worker and working in the hospice space. And if there's one or both of those experiences would certainly shape your view on this subject, it has to be those two career paths that you were on.
Yeah, absolutely. Brooke and I both, Brooke's a nurse, I'm a social worker. We both worked in hospice and home health for about 15 years prior to opening this business. And we just saw this repeated theme of people needing the care and not being able to pay for it. And so when we walk down this path of Medicaid with folks, it becomes very complex and virtually impossible for our seniors to handle on their own. So we saw the need and the problems, and we opened Legacy Navigation about 6 years ago to specifically address this issue and really take it off their shoulders and do it for them. So we've become experts in the field, and Medicaid is our way in the United States of helping our seniors and disabled pay for care if they're unable to pay for it on their own. And that's most of us. Right? We're not expecting to put out $30,000 a month for a private in-home caregiver or $15,000 a month for a nursing home. So these are just things we haven't planned for, and there are tools to use.
So let's get into those tools. So Medicaid specifically, we've already debunked one thing. Well, maybe not a debunk, but providing that clarification that Medicaid does cover long-term care. Now, is there different variations of this? And Alex, please chime in if you have questions on this, like variations of long-term care. Because you could look at a situation or an individual where maybe they just need a little bit of assistance at home, where maybe they're not as mobile and they just need someone to come in, like a skilled nurse to come in and just administer medications and things like that. Or someone who is all the way on the other side of the spectrum of full-blown, Alzheimer's, dementia, and they need to be in a facility and they don't have that option of in-home care. So is there different versions of this?
Well, maybe this doesn't qualify, or maybe it does. I have a good friend who has metastasized brain cancer who has to have a surgery, and it's a 3-month recovery, and she lives alone.
Right.
But it's not a hospitalized recovery.
Right.
Those kinds of things.
Yeah.
So Medicaid covers long-term care, right? So we have Medicare and Medicaid. A lot of people get confused with Medicare.
Yeah.
And they think that Medicare, they have insurance and Medicare is going to pay for things. Medicare will pay for rehabilitation, right?
Okay.
So they'll pay for 21 days in a rehab facility if you qualify and meet goals for that amount of time. After that, they'll pay for 80 more days, but you have a high share of cost for that. And so after that, you're just dropped, you're on your own. So Medicaid comes in when it's a long-term care situation, whether that's skilled nursing, and that's the long-term care waiver through Medicaid. And if it's assisted living or if it's at-home care, that's the home care home-based waiver. And that's specifically Idaho's name for it. We practice in 44 different states, and so every state has their different name and different programs, but all essentially the same thing. So they do cover in-home care, and they do cover assisted living as well as long-term care.
I don't think most people realize, I didn't, that you could have in-home coverage.
Correct.
Yeah, that's a big piece too, because what is the biggest blind side that people miss on these costs, right? Because we see these, just that cliche saying of, oh, this is just going to be so expensive, and so it's going to be this and that. It's like, okay, I get it, but I've had conversations with people where they're like, they were in an assisted living facility and it was about $5,000 a month, and with Social Security and the pension that they come in, we only had to make up a shortfall of, maybe $500 a month, and they had cash and assets to do it. I'm like, oh, okay, well, that's a good scenario. Right. And then there's the other side of the spectrum where you can hear, you better be prepared for this long-term care cost, because this could be $12,000 to $15,000 depending on where the area that it is. There's probably degrees of truths in that, right?
Absolutely. So for in-home care, they look at the financial part completely separately, as if you were in a facility. So they come and they do an assessment. The state will do an assessment and allot you a certain amount of hours. And those hours, you may or may not have a small copay for those hours. In assisted living and skilled nursing, those look very different, where essentially you're giving your whole paycheck to the facility and you're allowed to keep a very small amount. In assisted living, it's $135. In skilled nursing, it's $40 that you get to keep for personal needs spending. The rest goes to the facility.
Wow. And so could some of those in-home hours be used for like respite care for a spouse or something that's caring for their loved one?
That's exactly what it's for.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yep. And they can come in and do things like meal prep, light housekeeping, medication administration, those kinds of things. But it is expensive. In-home care right now is anywhere from $35 to $50 an hour. So if you're needing 24-hour care and you want to stay in your home, it's around $30,000 a month.
$30 grand a month. That is a spicy meatball. That really confirms that understanding the dynamics of how you can use Medicaid as a tool. Let's debunk some myths. Let's talk about what that protocol looks like and actually how this rubber meets the road, meaning how you've helped people who have needed this type of care or help and how you've helped them. This is the Real Money Pros. We'll be right back. Find our educational content. You can find previous podcasted episodes. Remember, we're not here to sell you anything. We're here to give you education. And the more education you have, the more tools you are armed with to make better strategic decisions. And one area of decision making where I think a lot of people get tripped up and a lot of people get confused, I would say, and this is for me personally, it's around the insurance realm. So today we're specifically talking about Medicaid, long-term care planning. How can we join these two and make sure that either you or your aging parent, they're aging with grace, meaning they're not left in some place and you feel financial stress and they're feeling financial stress, because I've seen so many clients where this has been a tremendous burden for them during this time, or they see this burden upcoming and it causes a lot of stress and uncertainty. So we want to remove that today. And that's why we have some experts here in this space. We have Brooke Baker. We also have Jessica Young with Legacy Navigate. You can go to legacynavigate.com to get more information there. But again, if you have questions, phone lines are open. This is a tremendous opportunity for you to ask questions around long-term care and how Medicaid works. 979-59-MONEY. That is 979-596-6639. You can also text that phone number as well with your questions. Okay, Brooke, Jessica, let's just dive right into it. Misconceptions or myths around Medicaid when it comes to the long-term care planning side. And we can talk about how this comes with enrollment, who qualifies when it comes to income, your assets, and what actions you can take to maybe get those assets out of your name so then you could potentially qualify. Let's just debunk some of the biggest myths that you've seen, and then Alex and I will probably throw some curveballs your way as well.
Great. Awesome. So let's just be real here. This segment isn't long enough for us to tell you all the myths about Medicaid.
We're going to try.
Right. We'll do our best. The reality is we have people come to us every day that say, I was instructed by an attorney to get divorced. Ugh. I have to sell my house and get rid of all of my assets to qualify, or I make too much money. So there's a million Medicaid myths out there. Everyone thinks that they don't qualify. I guarantee if you don't qualify, it's because you have, $2 million in the bank and a long-term care policy and plenty to keep you busy your entire life, right? Or to keep you in long-term care for your entire life. Other than that, you don't make too much money. There are things in Idaho called a Miller Trust that solve that income issue. Mm-hmm. So nobody ever makes too much money. You can get the VA pay, you can get your pension, you can get all of those things and still qualify income-wise. Don't ever get divorced. It's actually illegal to get divorced to qualify for Medicaid. They look at it as a asset transfer, right? That wasn't necessary. I'll let Jessica speak a little bit to the Medicaid myths as far as assets go.
That's real quick, Jessica. So maybe you can add to this too, because I think that's a big piece where, okay, you're looking at your balance sheet, if you will. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of people look at through the Medicaid long-term care planning as this, where I've worked so hard to delay gratification. I've seen great growth in all my investments, the value of my home, and I don't want my entire estate value, meaning when I pass, meaning nothing's left because it all went to the cost of a long-term care.
Or leave that spouse destitute because everything got spent and there's still a spouse that needs to live.
Right? Exactly. Absolutely. So they're looking at this balance sheet and they're thinking, okay, well, I have all these assets that immediately disqualify me. So you just debunked it right there, Brooke, where you're saying, okay, we could get divorced. So no, that's illegal. That's probably a bad idea.
Is that
right?
every state?
Terrible idea. Every state.
Then why do attorneys still tell people to do it?
Well, because they're uneducated, right? And that's fine. It's just if you have a spouse, and Jessica will speak more to this, but if you have a spouse, we can actually transfer almost 100% of your assets to that well spouse and still get you more, as the healthy spouse, still get you more income each month.
Okay.
So I'll let Jessica.
Yeah, one of the great things about the Medicaid waiver is that the state doesn't want your spouse on the streets, right? We don't want to put the healthy spouse in a destitute situation and now they're unable to sustain life. And they're both on Medicaid. And so Medicaid allows for transferring of assets between spouses up to a certain amount of money. They also, in Idaho, do some really cool things where if your 401k or IRA is paying out a minimum distribution, those are not counted as assets. It's just counted as income. And again, if that income puts you over that income limit for Medicaid's limits, we can do a Miller Trust, which will fix that.
So let's talk about the income thing real quick, Alex. So, and I think a lot of people see that we're like, I'm getting Social Security. It's not very much. Maybe I get a little pension. I'm taking required minimum distributions. Maybe I'm getting some interests off of my bank or maybe some dividend income off of my investments. And a lot of times where I've seen, because real quick, what is a rough number of like the threshold? If you go over that amount, you won't qualify for Medicaid. It's around $2,000 a month?
$2,900.
Okay,
And does it vary from state to state?
Yes. Every state is different with everything.
Okay, so it varies from state to state. So meaning you're essentially what you're saying is that don't think that you automatically won't qualify because you're getting because I ran into this with a client where they want to do this type of planning, but when we looked at the Social Security, the pension that she was receiving, she's getting about $6,000 a month, which is not even trying. Which immediately the first thing that would come to mind is like, there's no way I'm going to qualify. But what you're saying, both of you are saying, is that there is a way where you can route that income into maybe what's called a Miller's Trust. It's probably similar to an irrevocable trust, meaning you set up a trust that you don't have control over, and that money just feeds into there, and then Medicaid would not deem that as a source of income. So bada bing, bada boom, you could potentially be approved in that regard.
Yeah, in that scenario, for example, if your client, maybe they needed to go into assisted living and that was $10,000 a month, right? She's still only making $6,000 a month. So yes, she's over that threshold of income, but the overage would go into a Miller Trust and she would still qualify since her cost of care is more than what she makes each month. And that is across the board in the United States. Some offer qualified income trust or Miller Trusts and some don't. They just say if you make less than the cost of your care, then you're eligible income-wise.
So there is that. So if you're in a state where they don't offer that Miller's Trust, then you're not completely debunked out of getting that. There could be some routes. It just seems like this whole world is just this space that you got to understand all the moving parts. So it's set up right, and you're getting some help. I mean, no pun intended, navigating, your legacy planning, right?
Yeah.
What other myths are there? So we talked about the divorce. That's illegal. Probably shouldn't do that just from the standpoint of just qualifying for Medicaid. Is generally the route to take where setting up an irrevocable. So you have the spouse asset transfer, and I think a lot of people lean on setting up what's called an irrevocable trust, where they transfer assets into said trust. They lose control, but then that is not looked at as an asset that's owned by that individual. So then, in theory, you could qualify for Medicaid. Is that a valid strategy?
Kind of.
Okay.
So what happens is people move money into a trust. If it's a living trust, it's revocable, right? And so everything you move into that living trust is now considered an asset because Medicaid says you transferred everything, we can't touch it, you're going to get penalized, including your house, right? If your house is not in that trust, then it's exempt anyway. So there's no reason to move that into a living trust. If it's a Medicaid compliant trust, they've set it up thinking that they don't have to have long-term care for 5 years, right? So Medicaid has that 5-year look back in Idaho and a lot of states.
Let's dive into that 5-year look back because that is a term that's been thrown around a lot of, okay, I get on Medicaid, but if this, and that happens, when I pass away, they're going to look back and they're going to take all my stuff back. Again, probably another myth that we need to debunk. This is the Real Money Pros. We've got to take a break. Stay with us. Apollon Wealth Management has transformed the way our team delivers financial advice. With their support, we're more equipped and more 795966639. If you're a little hesitant to have your voice go over the airwaves, send us a text message because I would imagine that you as a listener out there, you probably have some preconceived notions about Medicaid and how it works with long-term care, how you're going to fund long-term care, of how that whole process works. And that's why we have some experts here today, Jessica Young, Brooke Baker with Legacy Navigate. That is legacynavigate.com. So if you've missed the first 2 segments, we're going to podcast this. You can go to therealmoneypros.com because there's so much information you can glean. It's so funny that we were all talking during the break, and it's like we could geek, like we could do a show on this for about 5 hours. I'm like, okay, that might bore the listeners, and we're going to get way too technical. But it just seems to me it's so important because I don't want to, sensationalize something here, but in my opinion, my anecdotal take on this is that this is going to be a problem. As we have this aging population, there's going to need to be some solutions, and people need to be forward thinking, because the last place you want to be is trying to come up with a long-term care or Medicaid strategy right in the throes of that battle, right? Because then you're talking about emotional turmoil, you're talking about stress, anxiety, and making decisions in an emotional reactive state generally don't give you the best outcome. So that's why I really think it's important to continue to bring up this conversation and what tools people have and what avenues they can take to give them some peace of mind around this, like actually give them a strategy. So one thing we were talking about during the break is that and I found this really interesting because a lot of people, they hear, and we suggest they do this, they do some level of estate planning. And a lot of times that is done in the form of a living trust. So my wife and I, we have a living trust. It's revocable. We can make changes during that. But you made an interesting comment, Brooke, and Jessica, you mentioned that too, like right before we went to the break, that there could be some issues with your Medicaid long-term care planning if you have something held in a living revocable trust. Why?
Correct. The reason why is because in Medicaid's eyes, they're going to allow you some assets as long as they can possibly recoup their the money that they give.
Because that's the idea, right? Like you go on Medicaid and then after you pass away, if your estate has assets left over, they're going to say, hey, well, all that cost of care that you weren't paying for while you're receiving it, we're going to get it on the back end through estate recovery.
Right.
Okay.
Right. So estate recovery is triggered by death, right? So and through probate. So if somebody dies and they have a living trust, nothing ever goes through probate.
Right.
Right.
Correct.
It protects it. So Medicaid can't attach a lien to it at that point. Mainly the home. They don't care about the other assets and those kinds of things. They're still going to count them as assets, but they can be held in that trust still. But the home, if it's put into the living trust because it wouldn't go through probate, then Medicaid says, well, now the entire asset of your house is an asset. So the entire equity of your house is now an asset.
That could be subject to recovery, or is that looked at through
Subject to recovery.
Interesting.
So because it went into the trust, they now
Count it
as an asset towards qualification?
Correct.
Okay.
Versus
Interesting.
if it wasn't in the irrevocable trust.
Right.
How do they look at that?
So we generally quit claim deed it back out of the trust.
Okay.
And then it's an exempt asset. So it will still go through probate, and Medicaid can still attach a lien to it. But there are also, and we won't get into all the nuts and bolts, but there are also 5 ways that we can quit claim deed a home out of somebody's name to protect that home too. So that's another tool.
So it's really coming down to like understanding what your overall plan is. Because if you're just aggressive with moving, let's say your house in this instance, to that living revocable trust, it loses that exempt status to now it's non-exempt,
Right.
which now we're looking at that entire thing could be subject to recapture. So
Right.
again, these are just the nuances of this type of planning and why
Correct.
you got to be forward looking on this. I mean, have you had any examples with like people that you work with or clients that you've worked with where it's been like you catch something like, okay, we got to fix this? I mean, how do you help navigate them through this?
Yeah, I mean, I give you an example. We've had multiple clients in the hospital where they're in crisis mode, like you're talking about, and having to make these decisions. One recent couple, elderly in their 80s, married couple, wife needed care, husband did not, didn't know how to afford the $12,000 a month at the long-term care center, and didn't want, to deplete everything they had, sell their home, etc. So we were able to do some Medicaid planning with this couple. We were able to quit claim deed the home into the well spouse's name, transfer a majority of assets and a portion of her income over to him. And so now her income and her assets are under the Medicaid qualification limits, and she's able to qualify, and he's still able to live his life. And Medicaid really doesn't want to put everybody on the street, right? And this benefit is to help people who need the care. So they do allow and have tools and strategies that people aren't aware of, and that's what Medicaid planning is. We're able to walk you through. We collect all of your information on income, assets, and your medical situation, and then help you make a plan.
And it's different when it's a spouse versus like if you're trying to transfer it to your kid or something, though, right? Mm-hmm. They look at it differently. Mm-hmm. Okay.
So Medicaid has a gifting penalty, essentially. So for every state has their different amounts. And they will say based on the amount that you gifted, you qualify or you're penalized for X amount of months, which Medicaid won't pay. And then after that penalty period, they'll kick in.
Okay.
So in the instance, Jeremiah, that we were talking about where somebody had done a irrevocable trust, 3 years ago, and they still have 2 years to go for that look back period, what Medicaid would do would be either to say you don't qualify for 2 years, or depending on what that amount was that they funded that trust with, they would assess that penalty divisor and make them spend down or make them wait until that was out, and then they could start Medicaid. But essentially, if you're putting that chunk of money, the 2 years is going to be less. So it just depends on,
what's the better outcome. Well, and I find that interesting too, because I think that's where I like to get in the nuts and bolts, because you hear this term of 5-year look back. And I'm like, okay, well, like what exactly is that? Like, how do they arrive at that? And then you kind of dive into what that whole process of, applying for Medicaid. It's like, well, a lot of that's handled like through that application process, where I'm sure they're looking at assets, tax returns, bank accounts for probably a number of years, where they can go follow that breadcrumb trail if need be, and they can identify certain things. And I'm sure that there's an attestation that you need to make as the person that's applying for it, saying like, no, like, well, here's the questionnaire that you gave me. Here's everything I listed out, and I'm, stating this under, perjury or whatever, all that. And I guess that's how they find it, right? So then if that's the case where, okay, you've done this, thoughtful planning and you've moved assets, but if you didn't do it within that 5-year clock, let's say you did it January 1, 2020, but you needed care January 1, 2023, well, you still in theory would have that 2-year mark. So in this case, they're going to say, well, you got to wait 2 years, or they're going to arrive at some type of calculation to say, well, here's what that penalty or whatever that cost would be. But I guess that is helpful to know, like in peace of mind. So if someone who did that, it's not, you're just completely left to the wolves of like, okay, well, like now you there's no way you're going to get Medicaid ever. It's like, no, you just got that 2-year period that we have to figure out. So let's look at all your resources and make sure all the puzzle pieces fit together.
Right.
I guess I'm kind of tracking here a little bit.
You're getting it.
I'm starting to.
Yeah, in Idaho, for every about $10,500 you gift, you're ineligible for Medicaid for 1 month.
Okay.
So if you can...
Within that 5-year period?
Period.
Okay.
Yeah,
okay.
Within that 5-year look back, the day you apply for Medicaid, they say the day you're applying in the last 5 years, have you sold or transferred anything for less than fair market value in order to qualify for Medicaid? So there's kind of some tricks there, right? And we've had multiple clients who've maybe made monthly donations to churches or helped a daughter with college. Those transfers were not in order to qualify for Medicaid. We do have the burden of proof to prove that to Medicaid, but those are all transfers that we could essentially get exempt.
So that's helpful that there are transfers that that are exempt from that disqualification, if you will, which I guess I kind of appreciate, where they follow the sentiment of like, okay, if you're really trying to, I don't want to say game the system, but
that's exactly.
I mean, but if you're truly trying to do that and do big asset transfers, that would be out of the norm of like what a normal person would do to like help your child with school, or help someone with this, or donating to a church. It's like, okay, we understand why you were doing that. That's kind of in the normal protocol of what you would do, like managing your finances. But that $200,000 cash transfer that you did amongst like all your grandkids, like that clearly is you being proactive. Which again, I mean, if you were under that 5-year plan, then, or that 5-year look back, then in theory that could work. So
yeah, and sometimes we even, last case scenario, we use gifting as a strategy. So if their cost of care is less than that penalty divisor, that 10.5 in Idaho, then it would make sense for them if they wanted to gift some money to a child or grandkids or whatever, and they would be able to preserve some of those assets. Not all of them, because they would be privately paying through their penalty period, but some assets would be saved.
Well, and I think that's the main objective here. People want to protect what they've made, what they've earned, right? It's not about what you made, it's about what you keep, right? And I think we're just following that sentiment here. Again, this is the Real Money Pros. Phone lines are open 979-59-MONEY. That is 979-596-6639. You have questions, we have answers. You can also send us a text message, therealmoneypros.com. You can send us an email, Jeremiah at therealmoneypros or Alex at therealmoneypros. We got to take a break. We'll be right back.
Businesses today face a barrage of challenges. They hunt for top talent, the search for the right benefits package, and the ever-rising tide of healthcare rates.
That we have here with our experts with Legacy Navigate, Jessica Young, Brooke Baker, that's legacynavigate.com. We're talking about how to coordinate Medicaid with long-term care. We've debunked a bunch of myths around this. We talked about how Medicaid actually functions in this regard, how all the different states have different rules around this and things that you need to pay attention to. Let's just jump into like action steps for someone who's maybe listening to this, or anyone who's out there is like, okay, like how do I take the first step into figuring this out? Because during the break, again, you know, Alex, during like anytime we have guests on the radio show, I feel like the best conversations happen during the break. So I'm like, wait, okay, don't say anything. We got to say this when we're on the air. You said that if someone were to engage with you for this type of Medicaid planning, it would take you what? How long?
If somebody's doing a Medicaid application on their own with income and assets that are over Medicaid's limits, it could take them 9 to 12 months to do it on their own.
It's like a year.
So like a year, where you're privately paying and unable to get the coverage for care, right?
And they don't go back pay. You just missed all that.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep. And with Legacy Navigation, we're about 90-day turnaround time, just really depending on Medicaid's processing times. But essentially, right, we know the questions, we know how to present the information, we know the system. So we can just get it all nice in a pretty little package and give it to Medicaid and get you rolling on your benefits.
Wow.
Okay, this last segment, we want to leave the listeners informed and really understanding what they should do next if they feel that this is the path that they need to take. So what are steps that they should take? What are signs that they should look for to get help, whether it's them themselves or maybe their kids or family members? At what age should adult children have these conversations with their parents? Like,
when are they sick enough?
yeah.
Right now.
Yeah,
right now.
Yeah.
So we always recommend that people reach out to us sooner than later, because when you're in that crisis mode and you're making these decisions based on emotional, responses, it's never appropriate, and it's usually a little bit late to really preserve the money. So let's have these decisions now. Make sure you have your power of attorneys in place. Make sure that you have your, advanced directives in place. Let's have these conversations as a pre-planning so that when it comes time, you're ready to roll and there's nothing else that you need to worry about, especially for children with adult parents or elderly parents. We need to be prepared for that, because it's going to fall on us.
Yeah.
I think listeners, for you out there, the first thing you need to do is seek help. We always do a free consultation. It's usually about an hour long, where we can go through the income and assets and give you kind of a rough plan of what to do. And of course, you could do that on your own, or you could have people like us do it for you. But there are a lot of tools and strategies out there. There is a lot of misinformation, and we'd love to help talk through that with you and help, make sure that you get the coverage that you need when you need it, instead of waiting until you're completely destitute.
And it sounds like as part of doing estate planning, you should be included in that conversation as well.
Yeah, we
so
often
that
are.
It all coordinates well together. You're not doing one that's in conflict with the other.
Exactly right. And so anytime we have a client who we haven't been in pre-planning with, we always ask, what are the other team members here? Do you have an attorney you're working with? Do you have a financial planner you're working with? And we have really nice, deep conversations with those people, and everybody's involved in this plan.
Fantastic.
Any thoughts? I mean, this could be a total anecdotal take, or maybe you have some legitimate experience in here, which I think you both do. Because I was under this assumption for a while, and then a couple people have told me that, no, that's kind of not right. But the quality of care that you get under Medicaid. And it just, I think that turns people off immediately. Like,
Right.
I don't want to go on Medicaid. Like, no, absolutely not. Like, is there legitimacy behind that? Like how do facilities and like long-term care facilities like coordinate with Medicaid? Is it like...
Yeah, great question. So essentially what happens is it's just a payer source, right? So in Idaho, essentially, if Medicaid's paying, because they don't always get a facility wouldn't always get the reimbursement that they would get from somebody privately, they may say that you have to have a shared room. That's the only difference in care. It doesn't change the nursing care. It doesn't change the medications. Nothing else changes. You still get the same care that everybody else gets. You just may have to have a shared room. There are ways around that we can work around that with families. So don't let that hinder you or scare you. But that's the only difference.
There isn't anything called an all Medicaid facility, right? There is no facility that just takes Medicaid patients. Every private pay facility that you see has a few Medicaid beds if they're willing. So there may be 3 to 5 Medicaid beds available at each facility in the area. Some don't offer Medicaid beds at all. But like Brooke's saying, right, it's the same caregivers that are caring for the private pay, and nobody knows the difference in the facility.
So do you see that there's an issue with just availability?
Yeah, that was my question.
Is that the
100%.
biggest hurdle that you run into? It's like, okay, you qualify, it's great, but I mean, if there's no beds that are offered,
right.
I mean, you get it's like a waiting list. I mean, how do you approach that?
Yeah, sometimes there's a waiting list. We've been really lucky as Medicaid planners. We've developed relationships with the facilities in the area who essentially, right, we are sort of guaranteeing them a payer source. We know we're going to get this Medicaid application approved. So they'll oftentimes accept our clients as Medicaid pending while we're waiting for their Medicaid to be approved, and or just, open a bed or offer a bed because we've been able to get that done. It's really difficult for facilities to, if you walk into a facility and say, hey, we applied for Medicaid, but it's going to be several months. What do we do with my mom? They're going to probably turn you away and say, come back when you're eligible because we can't bill. We can't get paid for the care we're providing until you have that benefit. So that's difficult for a lot of people. There is definitely a limit, but we've had small waiting lists where people wait maybe a few weeks before they need to get in. But yeah, typically we're able to help place. And that's a part of what we do too, as our clinical background is help find placement for Medicaid, which nobody else does.
I feel like it's just a service that's going to there's going to be more and more demand, like as people are aging, and then especially their kids are trying to help them get them through this. One thing I want to pivot on, another thing you mentioned about relocating, like I think is, families kind of disperse across the country or maybe globally or whatever the case is, that the logistics can be a little bit difficult. I mean, I got a number of clients where, he's like, I got to go down to California again, and I got to deal with my dad's situation, and he's multiple states away. And you mentioned that there's an option that at least a service, if I'm mistaken, that's a service that you offer for relocation. Tell me about that.
Yes. So we also, when Jessica and I built this business, we really wanted to encompass everything that people might need. And so it's led us into this non-emergent travel companion line, I guess, of business that we do. And so we fly from state to state. We help seniors relocate. Oftentimes it's, mom and dad live in a separate state, or mom does, and we need to fly them to live closer to us so that we can see them.
Yeah.
Or we're paying an outrageous amount of money for assisted living in California, and we can move them here and they get a better, apartment. And so we help seniors by flying them first class. We do all the coordination between facilities or between home and facility, do all the medication management, all the ADLs, and get them where they need to go.
Wow. That's huge.
Truly a door-through-door service where we're tucking them in at their new facility and talking the family through, what this looks like next, and providing that emotional support as well, because it's a lot of emotional turmoil when you're dealing with aging parents.
Yeah, I was introduced to this. One of my clients, she went to it's kind of a threefold in one place, where it's the group community living, and then if they need the assisted living, they have that space.
Right.
And then if they need the long-term care facility, it's kind of that all-encompassing facility. And she doesn't have any family out here, no kids. So I was like, I'm going to go with you to go look at this place.
Yeah.
And I have no experience in this. And so that's what's really just kind of, this was about a year ago, that's just kind of made this top of mind of like, I just learned a lot just going through this process, helping my client navigate this. And now now learning more about the Medicaid side and that you have tools. I mean, all this stuff is just extremely important. So again, we have Brooke Baker, Jessica Young with Legacy Navigation. That's legacynavigate.com. You can go to therealmoneypros.com. We can help get you connected. Real quick, what states are you not eligible or able to work in? Do you know off the top of your head?
Yeah, as far as transport, we can work in any state. As far as Medicaid planning, we can't work in Texas, Florida, Ohio. There's some other states that I can't remember off the top of my head, but they require an elder law attorney to do Medicaid planning in those states.
Okay.
Copy that. Okay. Well, again, therealmoneypros.com, legacynavigate.com. That's where you can get more information. I don't think this is going to be the last time that we're going to have you sharing your expertise around this subject moving forward. We certainly appreciate the time. Again, The Real Money Pros, that is a wrap-up of Hour 1. We are back live for Hour number 2. Stay with us.
Thank you.
The Real Money Pros is hosted by Brian Wiley and other team members of Tree City Advisors of Apollon. Tree City Advisors of Apollon.
Text message 97959-MONEY. That is 979-596-6639. Now we're laughing because our producer, Alec, is cute little baby boy Andrew. He was here running around making his coos of I think he's 16 months maybe now, 15 months. So yeah, just a cute little guy running around. It's great. But obviously made us chuckle going in as soon as it's like, okay, we're live, we're on. It's like, oh, we got a little toddler in here running around. It's like we got a show that we have to hit, and certainly we do. Topics are abundant. We can talk about the record-setting week that we saw on Wall Street. The NASDAQ continuing to reach all-time highs. The technology sector, you have concentration of growth based on good earnings, whether it's your Microns, your AMDs, Advanced Micro Devices, your Intels, all part of this AI narrative, and certainly a tide that's lifting all boats. We can certainly talk about that. We can talk about strategies of potentially, because I will say this, if you are sitting on big gains from a single position, which I've seen a lot of in my day, Alex, you've seen as well.
Yeah.
There are a lot of strategies where, dare I say, you can have your cake and eat it too.
Well, and we've, I'm going to say recently, because it is fairly recent in our careers, learned some additional strategies to really help with offsetting some of those taxes with those large gain positions. So that we didn't have before because we weren't aware of them.
Would you agree or maybe disagree to some level that is that the biggest hesitancy for one that's maybe seen 1,000% or 2,000% growth on a position that they invested in, and especially if it's not held in an IRA or a Roth? And we can have conversations of why you don't have tax implications if you sell inside one of those accounts. But if you just set up an investment account under your name or you and your spouse, and you're like, you know what, I want to go buy Micron, and it's 2018, and you put close to $10,000 in it. Well, you fast forward to today, you're going to be up probably 1,700%, meaning you're sitting on maybe $160,000 or $170,000. So it's great you have those gains on paper, but if you want to recognize that gain, take said investment and turn it into a tangible outcome, like a quality of life impact, maybe an RV purchase, pay down some debt, whatever the case is.
Right.
You got to understand the tax consequence that comes behind that as soon as you hit that sell button.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people who see that potential tax consequence, where they're looking at their investment account, you see the basis, right?
Right.
Where you see where you paid for it, and then you see what your unrealized gains are, and you're like, well, if I sell it, then that unrealized gain, I'm going to have to pay taxes on that.
Yeah. And I do think I think it's a combination of that and is it going to go higher? I think those two things, it's one or the other or both that have people hesitating and taking those large gains. And you know what? Taxes, not great if you're going to lose a large portion of that gain, but there are discussions to be had, and sometimes it's worth it. 100%.
You can't just look at it as, I don't want to sell because I have to pay a bunch of taxes. Like, really, are you? Well, number one,
maybe there's a way around some of that.
Well, maybe there is, maybe there isn't, but maybe that tax consequence or that tax bogey, if you will, is not as extreme as one would think. And I just brought this. A client just had a conversation with me in my office on Thursday. They own a rental property in Arizona, and it's an underperforming rental property. Let's put it that way. They appreciate it because it it's a short-term rental that basically they have 2 known people that come and use it when they snowbird out in Arizona. But when he's telling me this, it's paid off, by the way, but he's like, when you factor in, the cost for like the house cleaning, the little bit of maintenance that we got to do, the property taxes, the insurance, he's like, I'm not even breaking even. He's like, and by the way, like the reason why we got it maybe close to 8 years ago, the reason why we purchased it is because, we were going down there. We had friends down there. Yeah. So then when we would make our, 4 trips a year down there, then we could keep an eye on it and we could do the maintenance and all that. To be clear, they weren't using that property for personal use. But now they're not doing that. They're not going down there. So, and he's like, but I talked to my accountant. He said, based on what I paid for and depreciation recapture, I'm going to lose all my money. I'm like, okay, that lose all my money. Let's dive into that a little bit. So you look at the numbers like, well, based on what you purchased it for, your capital improvements that you did, and based on what you would sell it at market value, your capital gain would be about $50,000. And then you would pay a capital gains tax on that $50,000. So is there?
And they were thinking the full sale price, forgetting they have a cost basis. It sounds like.
But if the CPA is just giving some blanket advice of saying, no, you don't want to sell that because if you do, you're gonna all your profits are gonna go to taxes. Like, no, that couldn't be any farther from the truth. That's completely false. The taxable consequence is going to be a $15,000 capital gain, and based on your level of income, you would pay 15% at most, and you likely won't pay. You may pay a net investment income tax of another 3.8%, but meaning you take what on the high end, and then you add in some state income tax. Maybe all in, they're at a little over 20%. Take 20% of that $50,000, and that's a rough estimate of what the taxes will actually be owed on that. Now we got to pay attention to. Okay, does that increase in modified adjusted gross income affect taxation of your Social Security? For in this case, it won't because he's already at the top of 85% of his Social Security being taxed. And okay, you might get bumped up in your Medicare Part B premiums via IRMAA charge, but there's likely an avenue that we could take basically to get looked at like a reevaluation of income saying, no, this is a one-time thing. It's not going to be an ongoing taxable event. So I'm just looking at it, I'm like, no, you should consider this. I'm not saying for you to sell it. You don't need the money, but basically you have an asset that you're not using that you're actually probably a net negative cash flow on it. And if you really don't want to take the tax hit, we can look at doing a 1031 exchange where you can take that money and put it into a Delaware statutory trust where you're actually getting cash flow on it. Maybe you're getting a 5 to 6% annualized yield. Significantly higher than what he's getting right now, and you can defer the taxes, so you don't pay taxes on it, and then you still get that step up in basis if one of the spouses dies.
Now it's a little different with appreciated stock, though, and because now this income is, especially if you're still working or you're not. We don't have to worry about Medicare premiums, but there is that net investment income tax depending on the threshold. That is an additional tax because the IRS has decided your income's too high.
Yep.
You do have the additional Medicare tax to think about. So finding a way to lessen what is seen as that gain amount could be huge in tax savings just to get you below those two.
Just to get you to those two. I mean, if you're looking at this alone, I guess the whole point of this being is this. If you're looking at this in a vacuum and the reason being that you're not going to justify liquidation of an investment, I don't care if it's a stock or a rental property or whatever the case is, if your justification to not sell it is because you're going to have to pay more in taxes, you barely even peeled off that first layer of the onion because 100%, it's just like this last hour. We had 2 great guests in there, and if you missed the first hour, highly recommend that you go to therealmoneypros.com. We will have this podcasted and that episode up for you early next week. But they debunked a bunch of myths when it came around Medicaid, specifically around the long-term care planning, where a lot of people think, no, I'm not going to qualify of this, or I make too much income, or I have too many assets. And an attorney said that we should do this with a trust, or you should do a divorce. And it's like, no, like all of those got debunked because there's so many strategies that are in alignment with Medicare, but if you're not a Medicare expert, you're not going to know. I didn't know. I mean, it was a great, for my selfish reasons, I learned a lot in that hour, and it really pointed out to me of how little I understood about Medicaid and how it operates on that long-term care side of things. Like it offers in-home care.
Yeah, I had no idea that they could do in-home.
Meaning you're not just looking at a care facility. So you bring that back to this strategy or lack of strategy around not liquidating an asset that could have a better net impact on your whole investment picture or your quality of life. And the reason why you're not doing it is because I don't want to pay the tax or the taxes are too high.
Yeah.
Not enough. Like you want to dive into and say, okay, maybe you're right, but let's find out if it's right. And if you're right, if it's a big tax bogey, well, let's find some various strategies that you could potentially tap into that asset for liquidity purposes and not run into a taxable issue. You could do direct indexing. You could do tax loss harvesting through other routes. You could do a long short strategy where you're actually doing derivatives off of that asset to where, again, you're not running into that tax bogey. So meaning there's so much more to be said, and I get it, human nature to be myopic. You're staring at the tree so you don't see the forest behind you. I think we use that term a lot on this show. But we got to take a break. When we come back, let's talk about these various strategies from a tax standpoint. Let's also talk about estate planning.
Yes.
Because that conversation that we had with Legacy Navigation, legacynavigate.com, it was eye-opening in how the importance it is to be proactive and make sure that your estate plan is in alignment with what you want done. We'll be right back.
Businesses today face a barrage of challenges. They hunt for top talent, the search for the right benefits package, and the ever-rising tide of healthcare.
Beauty of Apollon Wealth Management, who is certainly a partner of the program and a partner of our firm, Tree City Advisors. It gives us a network of great advisors, fiduciary advisors across the country. So again, if you're in retirement, planning for retirement, I don't care what the case is, you need tax strategies, estate planning strategies, you need legacy planning strategies, whatever strategy you need to have a conversation with someone experienced and who's actually acting in a fiduciary capacity, that's where you can get connected with them. Take our Better Buckets assessment. You can basically arrive at a point where you can maintain liquidity, make sure your assets are producing enough income, and you're experiencing growth, meaning it compartmentalizes your investments to give you a base foundation for all your decision making. Meaning, what is the purpose of the money? You have a purpose of the money, you put a timeline on it, and that timeline then gives you the protocol of how or if that money should be invested.
Yeah.
And again, phone lines are open 979-59-MONEY. That is 979-596-6639. You can send us a text message to that line as well. I am Jeremiah Bates. She is Alexandra Lundgren. We're fiduciary financial advisors here at your service. Feel free to change the topic. Anything you have top of mind, we can cover it. The last hour, we obviously were in the depths of long-term care and Medicaid.
Right.
And Alex, after we did that first hour, we just immediately transitioned to talking about the estate planning and how ultimately just having a plan is so important versus having nothing in place.
Yeah.
And then that event happens and then you're in complete reaction mode.
And I think about it because we talk quite often on this show about it, when you self-manage investments, have a strategy and stick to it, right? Which is, that if it goes to here, you're going to sell it. And then you don't have to make emotional decisions on your investments. This is the same thing. You don't want to make these estate planning and Medicaid decisions when you're emotional, in pain, somebody's sick, whatever's going on. So it's the same idea. Do this in advance.
Well, especially with you could talk about, the market does have corrections. We do see bear markets and things like that. And you just never know when. You don't know what that catalyst is going to be that's going to cause that reaction. I would argue when it comes to the estate planning side of things, even more, but you know it's going to come. I mean,
everybody's going to experience this.
Yeah.
At some, we're all going to die.
Yeah.
Whether it's fast or slow, we're all going to die. So you got to do it anyway. You might as well do it early and get it out of the way.
Well, until we have the ability to upload our consciousness into a computer. I'm joking. We're all human, and the inevitability of end of life is going to happen. So this is where you translate into the estate planning component. And when it comes to estate planning, there's a few options you can take. You can do nothing, which is arguably going to go through probate, which means that someone in your family or someone's going to get notified of your passing, and they're going to go have to petition a probate court. Why? Because they need the legal authority to then go to the bank, go to the Fidelities, the Edward Jones, the Schwabs, or whatever, or wherever that account is held. That's going to give you the authority to say, okay, this owner of this asset or this account has now passed. Now, I've been now appointed by the court to have control of this account to distribute to
Whoever.
Well,
right? And also to have the authority to stop the automatic billing for the newspaper or the whatever it is that's going on. Otherwise, they're going to keep debiting accounts too. You don't have that authority without it. If you do nothing, you probably don't have any of those documents that are needed in case you don't die.
Indeed, like the power of attorney side of things.
Yeah, and the living will and healthcare directives.
Meaning you get in an accident and you haven't passed away, but you are not in a position or have the ability to make a move, right? So meaning assigning someone that capacity. Or pay your own bills. Yep. Or you could go from a standpoint to, you could look at it from a lens of doing a will. So if you did nothing, okay, I'll do a will. Well, a will is basically going to guarantee probate because a will is a set of instructions that goes to, now keep in mind, we're not estate planning attorneys, but we've seen enough cases
where probate's not the worst thing in the world.
It's not. There's certain situations where it goes just fine. So I'm not trying to fear monger here by any means, but let's just talk about the actual reality of that situation. If you do a will, then that's a set of instructions that goes through probate. And again, it's still open to be contested. There's still public notification of the passing. So in theory, people can come out of the woodwork and contest that will, but it's still going through the probate process. Now there's the trust-based planning, which in most cases, most cases that I see when it comes to estate planning, it's I want to do a trust because, hey, if I pass away, I just want to make sure that it avoids probate and it's just clean and easy settlement of my estate. My house, the rental property, my investment accounts, my retirement accounts, the cars, the personal heirlooms and legacy items that I have. Like, I want this document to encompass, number one, if we were to pass away, who's going to be in position of authority to make sure all this stuff goes to the right people. And I'm going to say, okay, 25% is going to go to daughter number 1, 25% is going to go to daughter number 2, 25% is going to go to son, and then 25% is going to go to all these charities. You can do that in a trust, and then assuming that the trust is updated and it's compliant, you worked with a valid estate planning attorney, everything looks good, then whoever you signed as the trustee, they carry it on upon your passing. You can make changes while you're alive, and then you avoid probate, assuming all your assets are titled to the trust. And as long as that piece is taken care of, check the box, it doesn't go through probate. And I guess the next logical question is, well, why? Why doesn't it have to go through probate? Because now the trust is its own living and breathing thing. Right. It gets its own, after you pass away, it gets its own tax ID number. The trust is now an entity almost. Think about it like that. The trust is its own entity that is going to be recognized. And then it comes down to who's in control of that entity. Well, you've assigned that through your initial trust-based planning. You've assigned a person to have control of that entity, and then that person has legal authority, fiduciary obligation to act within the rules of the trust that you defined, and then it distributes to your beneficiaries. And you can put carve outs and you can build that trust really however you want. I've had some certain features in my trust that my wife and I created, my wife Tatum, and that's just because we're in our season of life where our kids are really young. We're relatively young, even though
it's a different lens at that point than it is when your kids are adults.
Yeah, 100%. But really, those are the simplest forms of estate planning that I think most people have in front of them. Now, how does this coordinate with the Medicaid side of things, like the long-term care planning? Because if there's one issue that's been brought up, and we got a question via our text line, which we're going to get to, but a big question is, how are we going to cover this cost of long-term care? Like we hear that it could be $15,000 a month, or maybe it's $6,000, and there's different levels. And what about getting in-home care, and how does it cost? And then if we can't afford the long-term care, then we got to pay out of pocket for it. And if we have to pay out of pocket for it, then just looking at all of our assets, we'd have to move it all to cash. And then what if we're on this long-term care for 5 years, and then we add in cost of inflation over those 5 years?
Yeah,
there's gonna be nothing left after. I'm making up a hypothetical scenario, but again, this is a conversation that I've heard many times over the past couple years, and this is a real thing that a lot of people are experiencing. And if not right now, I think that it's going to accelerate over the next few years.
Agreed.
We have an aging population. the kids of this aging population are concerned because they're trying to build their way. They're trying to do their delayed gratification so they have a retirement. And you start to see that stress come in. You start to see that uncertainty come in. So even though you have this tight-knit, dialed-in estate plan, what's the plan around long-term care? And if it's needed, how do you cover it? We'll talk about that when we come back.
As we age, managing our finances can become increasingly complex with ever-changing tax laws, estate planning, insurance.
66639. Give us a call or send us a text message. We're going to go right to the text line right now. We have a question. It looks like an area code out of Oregon. The question is this: what about selling a big gain right before applying for Medicare? Is there a better time to sell after applying or before?
So
we gotta kind of logic through this of why this is actually a valid question.
Yeah. So the premium that you pay with Medicare when you turn 65 is income dependent. So the lowest that you pay right now, I think, is, I'm going to mess up the numbers, but like $180 a month. Is it up to 202? I think it's up to 202.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's up to 202.
Google will tell me.
I'll find it.
I think it's up to 202. But then if you cross another income threshold, then it goes up again. And this is the monthly amount. And currently what Medicare does is they look at your income from 2 years ago to determine what the payment is. Now think about this. The reason 2 years ago is because all those tax returns have been filed and they're now accessible. So if you have been working and then you retire and your income's going to significantly change, you can file a form and give it the reason why the income's changing as retirement or something like that, and make an appeal. And in the meantime, you're going to have to pay the higher amount. And if you have two of you paying for Medicare in a household, this change in premium applies to both regardless of the ownership of the asset. As far as getting a gain, like selling a property or an investment and getting this huge gain, it's going to show as income on the taxes. So honestly, whether it's as you're getting ready to apply or after you apply, it probably doesn't make a lot of difference. You're still going to have the 1 year with that income in it that you're going to have to pay the higher premiums for. It's just, when is it going to happen?
Yeah, so let's dive into it. So if we're looking at 2026, so again, your Medicare, and this is Part A, Part B. So if we're looking at and again, Alex, it's all based on your modified adjusted gross income. So just think gross income. If you're filing and again, this is a 2024. So what will determine your premium for 2026 is going to be based on what income did you report on your tax return in 2024? So if you were married filing a joint tax return, if your income was $218,000 or less, you're in that lowest premium bracket, which is about $203 a month. We'll just round up 10 cents. You're going to go into the next tier if your income was between $218,000 all the way up to $274,000. Again, if you're filing a joint return, and that bumps your income or your premium payment up to $284.10. And then there's a pretty big jump for the next one. So if your MAGI for 2024 was between $274,000 and $342,000, then you're paying almost $406 a month.
Basically, you're doubling your premium.
Yeah, pretty darn close. So it's a really good question from that text question that was sent in. That, what about selling a big gain? Well, you got to understand that if you sold a position, again, assuming it's in a non-qualified account, so if you sell it, it's going to trigger a taxable event in 2026. That gain will be included in your MAGI for 2026. Even though it's taxed at a different rate, it's not taxed at ordinary income rates, it will be added to your MAGI. Well, what is your MIG used for? Your MAGI is used for your Medicare Part B premiums. It's going to be used for your healthcare exchange, potential tax credit there. I mean, it's going to determine a lot of things. So yeah, it's something that you might want to consider. But Alex, to your point, if you sold it this year, then that's not going to affect your Medicare Part B premiums until 2028. Right. So you have some time underneath your belt to at least prepare for that. Now, there is an option to where you can have with the Social Security Administration to qualify for a life-changing event, meaning I had a one-time spike in income So I don't feel like I should be now paying for, in theory, for, a couple years maybe, because they do it a year back. We shouldn't have to apply or pay for that year 1 or 2 years of higher Medicare Part B premiums. Generally speaking, if it's like a unforeseen event, you know what I mean? Like a retirement or work stoppage, reduction in hours, death of a spouse, divorce, like loss of income, meaning like a truly like unexpected, like something just out of your control happened. But if you're the one proactively like pulling the trigger on a Roth conversion, proactively pulling the trigger on a real estate, usually, I'm going to asterisk this, usually you may not qualify for that IRMAA appeal. Doesn't mean you shouldn't though.
Yeah, well, and you're still going to want to file the SSA 44 or SS 44 form for after the years after the sale of that property, especially or whatever this asset was. If it's a rental property, you're definitely going to want to do it, because now you're going to say that was a one-time income increase from the sale of it. Oh, and my overall income decreased because now I no longer get rental income.
Right.
So you're going to want to cover both of those.
Yeah, you're going to have to cover both of those. So, I mean, to answer the question directly, is it better time to sell before or right after? I would say it's kind of a moot point. I mean, it
unless
really
you
isn't.
can do it, multiple years before eligibility.
Yeah, I would say don't let that Medicare enrollment tail wag the dog around when you sell.
Yeah,
right. Like meaning,
if it's a good deal, do it.
If it's the right time to sell, meaning because you have a tangible need for it, like you need the cash from that liquidation, or you meet your mark, whatever the case is, like you have a reason for why you're considering selling it. And I do appreciate that they're taking into consideration what are the ramifications for selling it from a tax standpoint. Love it. We just covered it. But in my opinion, don't let the Medicare side of things, because if you're going to recognize a gain, you're going to recognize a gain. And whether it's going to be Medicare premium charge at 1 year versus the other, I mean, you're still going to run into it at the end of the day.
Right.
So as the old saying goes, it's a good problem to have when you have an income event, because it means you made money. You made gains on your money, right? Good return on investment. But again, just be cognizant of these things so there's no surprises. My one takeaway is this, like we pretty much well covered it. So that listener who sent that text message in, whenever you do sell it in that year, well, at least you now know how that whole thing's going to operate. You're going to know what the effect will be from a Medicare standpoint. Also pay attention to the taxation of your Social Security if you are or receiving Social Security at that point, because that might change the taxation of your Social Security as well. So really good question. Again, you can send us a text message or call us 979-59-MONEY, 979-596-6639. Okay, Alex, we were talking about estate planning and how this can potentially coordinate with long-term care. What are your thoughts on someone who's, let's say maybe early to mid 50s, and maybe they saw their parent age, they didn't have, much assets, and maybe the parent's still alive or passing away, so now they're considering options of long-term care. Like, what do you see in these regards?
So I think there's a discussion to be had for sure, because the costs of long-term care are not going to go down.
Right.
That's a given. There are limited resources in the amount of like facilities that have beds, and especially memory care, because that is such a long-term and so expensive care that I would say that the majority of those end up on Medicaid at some point. But I think that I don't think long-term care insurance is off the table, but I think the kind that feels like medical insurance where you just pay the monthly premium is. Those are exorbitantly expensive now. But and that's when, Dave Ramsey used to say, don't talk about it till you're 60. It was that kind he was talking about. Now, when it's paired with a life insurance, so that if you never use it, there's a death benefit, the earlier you get it, the cheaper it is. So now it is an in your 50s kind of a discussion. You've seen a family member go through this. Is there we use part of the death benefit in advance to help offset costs type thing. But also, you've got to coordinate your estate planning with Medicaid planning, because I had no idea that in our state, if you do this living estate planning trust and put the house into it, they can make you wait 5 years. That's huge.
Yeah,
because you don't know when that clock needs to start.
In my opinion, it just comes down to what do you want. Just like
for sure.
Really, what do you want out of this? So, in my experience, clients that are very adamant about having this conversation and wanting to make sure it's usually on the heels, or they're in the throes of dealing it with their parents.
For sure.
And they're just,
It's a mess.
They're dealing with a mess. So they just want to make sure that they're covered. So again, not saying that going the traditional long-term care route, like you said, Alex, where you pay a premium and then when I need it, it's covering all or majority of all the costs and all of that. That's very expensive. Like,
yes.
It is just very expensive. And that's not being sensationalist here. Fear. I mean, it is a hefty fee. But again, if that is in your order of priorities at the very top and you're willing to give and take a little bit, meaning, okay, I'll be happy to spend 20, 30, maybe even more than that every year for that premium to make sure that I have good quality, like my care is covered through that insurance policy, that's great. But then the question becomes, okay, how is that impacting quality of life right now? And do you want to experience that? And if you're okay with doing that, that's fine. That's certainly a route. I think a lot of people don't want to take that route. They're like,
I agree.
well, I like going on my trips every year, and I don't want to pay that. I don't want to give away the trips for long-term care. But lots more to cover. We got to take a break. This is The Real Money Pros. We'll be right back.
Businesses today face a barrage of challenges. They hunt for top talent, the search for the right benefits package, and the ever-rising...
Are live. Phone lines are open. 979-59-MONEY. That is 979-596-6639. You can send us a text message as well if you don't want to go live with your voice over the airwaves. I've said it once and I'll say it again. Even though I host and co-host a radio show program, I would be nervous to call into a radio show for whatever reason. I'm always like, I don't want to ask a dumb question or this and that. Well, it's as they say, there's no dumb questions, but that's why we leave the text line open. You can also send an email, Jeremiah@therealmoneypros.com, Alex@therealmoneypros.com. You can shoot us an email and we'll answer your question live on air. It was a good question that we got through the text line around, hey, is there an issue with me selling an asset before or after applying for Medicare? We pretty much covered that. And why, when it comes to sitting on these appreciated assets, just understanding the whole landscape of, hey, it's not just selling it, it is what are the taxes? And then how does that not just paying taxes on it, how does it affect my Medicare premiums? How does that affect the taxation of my Social Security? Am I now paying net investment income tax on that?
Yeah.
Now per the big beautiful bill, that enhanced senior deduction, where if you're 65 and older, this
could be really helpful.
You could have $12,000 of a standard deduction that you're ready to take, and maybe you had that for 2025, and then you sell something in 2026, and where'd my enhanced standard deduction go? Well, because you made too much money, you're now phased out. So you can just see the point that I'm making is that you just can't look at that on an island on its own. You got to see how does that affect the whole ecosystem of those waters that you're sailing in. I had a prime example of this. I had a client that I met with earlier this week, and Alex, I'm sure you've had similar situations where his kids are growing and they're having grandkids. He's like, we had this house, and it's funny how he mentioned it. He said, we had a bigger house and a lawn that was about a 5-beer mow. He's like,
I love it.
He's like, now my mow's about a half a beer, right? And I'm like, oh, that's great. I'm taking that one. But they have the house, then they downsize, but now they need to upsize again because he's like, hey, my kids are working, they're doing great, but now we're taking on these grandkids are now taking up a lot of our time, which he loves and appreciates, but he's like, we just got to have more room. Yeah. He's like, okay, so here's the plan. So we're planning, okay, like how do we liquidate some real estate? How do we find that? And obviously how we looked at this is he's going to sell his primary residence. It's grown in value, but they're not going to pay any taxes on it because they have the 121 exemption, and that means that $500,000 of gains, if you're married filing jointly, you don't pay taxes on. So check that box. He'll get the liquidity from selling his current primary home without any tax consequence. He's got a rental property that's been a bit of a thorn in his side.
Okay.
He's like, okay, and he's got a pretty, relatively decent portfolio of rental properties, and all these things are cash flowing, but this is the one that cash flows the least, and this is the one that's kind of been a thorn in his side just through maintenance and having issues. And you know what? This is the one that we want to pinpoint out. So from a number standpoint, it looks good, but then he's also asking, hey, I'm eligible for Social Security. Should we turn it on? Well, then it was interesting too, because then we dove into Social Security dynamics of, Okay, here's his benefit. No, by the way, your spouse is going to get 50% of yours. He's like, wait, what? He had no idea. He thought she was subject to her smaller benefit, which is it was like honestly like $300 a month.
Yeah.
I'm like, no,
Quite often the case.
She's going to get half of yours, which is going to be closer to $3,000. Like, maybe not that much, a little less, closer to $2,500. So that was a good eye-opening data point for him.
Good.
But the question around him filing for Social Security this year, if he turns on Social Security, he's going to get a half a year. Because he turns full retirement age in July. So basically we get a half a year's of his benefit. So I'm like, okay, let me dive into the numbers. Let me kind of do some projections for this year and see how this would affect things from a tax standpoint. Because one thing that he was looking at is like, well, am I better off delaying till next year? Because I know I'm going to have these taxable events. I'm like, I appreciate you thinking like this. Exactly where I'm thinking.
Well, plus the gain and what the benefit's going to be.
What the gain and the benefit's going to be. But also his wife is receiving a tax credit. He's on Medicare. His wife is not on Medicare yet. She's got one more year of health insurance through the exchange. And she is receiving a tax credit. So reached out to the gentleman that got him set up on the exchange with their health insurance plan. And I said, hey, what was the projected gross MAGI that they put on their health insurance enrollment for 2026? So he gave me the number. And I'm looking at it, I'm like, actually filing for Social Security this year would have a net negative to you. He's like, what? I'm like, well, the reality is if you turn on that extra with that capital gain you're going to receive,
right,
and with the amount of money that you stated and the threshold of income that that you need to stay below to maintain your tax credit, if you turn on even just the margins are thin. The margins are really thin. I'm like, so, and the nice thing in this case is that he doesn't need the Social Security. So that's what made this kind of the optionality certainly work in our favor. And I told him that. I said, listen, the fact that you don't need this for cash flow, this is going to give us some options here to really be tax efficient. And that's ultimately the answer that we came to. It's like, hey, let's delay. We can turn that spigot on first thing, start in 2027. You maintain that tax credit for this year, which keeps more money in your pocket. And then after that, he's like, well, then, and then by the way, in 2027, he wants to sell a commercial property that he's for definitely going to sell, and that would completely blow the tax credit out of the water. So, like, if we really want to make this as efficient as possible, this is how we're going to do it. Do the sell the property, recognize the gain, no taxes on the primary sell. Let's delay Social Security to the next year. There's no advanced premium tax payback that you received for 2026. And everything's efficient and rolling. But it just goes to show you, just in line like what we've been talking about, Alex, especially with that question that we got of, it's not just one thing.
Right.
It's not just sell it, get the cash so I can go get that. It's like no
you have
surprises.
to look at all the different things that are affected by your income, whether it's what you pay or what you can no longer utilize.
Those benefits are there for you. I mean, especially in the form of the advanced premium tax credit, or even what we were talking about with the Medicaid planning for long-term care.
Yeah, or even just that extra standard deduction when you're 65 and over right now. I mean, losing that when we're only going to have it for 4 years anyway, and one of them's just happened, I mean, that would kind of, if you didn't realize you were doing that in the process, even your estimation on your taxes is going to be off.
That's a good question. So that enhanced senior deduction. So just to be clear what we were talking about, per the big, beautiful, so most individuals are familiar with their standard deduction, which means that for 2026, I believe the standard deduction on its own for a married couple filing jointly is $32,200, if I'm not mistaken.
Pretty close, yeah.
Meaning, and so it's either you're taking the standard deduction or you're itemizing, right? So your itemizations would be like, your mortgage interest, your charitable donations, your medical costs, and meaning all those need to add up
to more
than that standard deduction for you to say, yeah, I'm going to itemize, which means you got to put all that in through your tax return or whatever. So majority with that, I mean, I would say this, most individuals, they're taking that standard deduction just because it's so dang high. So $32,200. Now add in the big, beautiful bill, where it gives $6,000, let's just say married filing jointly. That's another $12,000 on top of that $32,200. Right. So now you're looking at 44.
Yeah.
Looking a little over 44,000 standard deduction. So,
but it starts to phase out with income as low as 150,000 is totally gone at 250. So depending on what your gain is on what you're selling, you could totally phase out of that. And now you've got an extra 24,000 of income you're paying taxes on in addition.
Yeah. So and again, we're not advocating for, don't recognize income because you want to hold on to that standard deduction. deduction because that may not be a better net benefit for you. But I've ran into a couple scenarios where, in fact, it is, because in 2027, they're already planning for some big taxable events that are going to happen anyway.
Yeah.
I'm like, well, why don't we just delay it a few months, make 2026 really efficient, capture all that, keep your tax obligation low, and then we can be even more efficient going into 2027 because you're going to lose that standard deduction anyways. We know that you're not going to receive the advanced premium tax credit anyways. We know that your Social Security is already going to be taxed 85% as is taxable. So in theory, it could just make a lot more sense. But that's where the planning, the projections really come into play. So again, it's like we said with the long-term care, with Medicaid, there's a lot of myths that need to be debunked. If you missed the first hour of our program, go to therealmoneypros.com.
Yeah.
We're going to post it on our podcast. There's a lot of great information on there around how to navigate this long-term care side of things and how Medicaid can help how it can align with that. And you might be surprised where you will likely qualify even if you think your assets are too high or if you think your income's too high. And no, we're not talking about a divorce and we're not talking about moving all these assets all around. It may not need to be that complicated. Sometimes the simple answer is the right answer. Again, we will be back here next week. I'm Jeremiah. She's Alex. Again, realmoneypros.com. Reach out to us, Jeremiah at therealmoneypros.com, Alex at therealmoneypros.com. You have questions, we have answers. We will see you next week.
The Real Money Pros is hosted by Brian Wiley and other team members of Tree City Advisors of Apollon. Tree City Advisors of Apollon is
simple, because a lot of times the best answer is the simple answer, not the confusing one. Not to say that there's some things that could be confusing. I'll be the first one to admit the whole insurance world can be a little bit confusing, but there's a lot of things that I deal with in life that I find confusing. But here for you, two fiduciary financial advisors who have seen a lot of client cases. And bottom line is, we're not trying to sell you anything. We're here to give you education. We are a sponsor-driven program. So yeah, we ask that you go to our website, therealmoneypros.com, see our sponsors, use them, interact with them. They're great. And that's what we're doing. But also, we're here for you. And we're live, so which means we can answer questions. You can interact with us. And our phone lines and text lines are open. 979-59-MONEY. That is 979-596-6639. Had a little
I'm glad
pause
that's
there.
you, not
well,
me.
hey, listen, this is hour number 3 of our 3-hour live program. Now, I know in the past, I think a lot of stations have been picking us up delayed, but Chicago, California, we are now live in your market as of today. So
And
again,
somebody in Chicago, please eat at Gibson's tonight for me. I miss it.
and I'm sure the weather in California is great, and it's probably getting pretty good in Chicago. But again, that's what we're here to do. We have a network of great advisors across the country that we can lean on, and we have advisors in those areas. So that's why we feel it's important that we're spreading this holistic fiduciary planning message to the advisor or to our listeners. So again, if you have questions around estate planning, you have questions around investing, we've seen a dramatic rise in the technology sector. I mean, this past week, markets building on all-time highs, just huge gains this week out of your chip stocks, like to your Microns, your Intels, all riding this AI wave. You want to talk about it? Great. Maybe you're sitting on some huge taxable gains for one of these positions, and you need effective strategies on to unwind it and actually turn those said gains into tangible results in the form of a quality life impact. That's great. Maybe you need to cover estate planning. What's the difference between a trust and a will? How does Medicaid work in the grand scheme of long-term planning? In the first hour of our 3-hour program, we had some great guests on that we were talking about long-term care and how that coordinates with Medicaid.
Yeah,
and
it was fascinating.
It was fascinating because it debunked a lot of myths and some just some assumptions that I had on Medicaid that were false and debunked.
Yeah, the things that you hear that are not true. And that was one of the conversations that we had during the break, was that somebody's aunt's sister's cousin's next door neighbor, this is what happened to him. And now you buy in that is truth instead of finding how do things actually apply to your personal situation. And I mean, I should have known that because I see that all the time in Social Security. How your neighbor files and how you file may not be the same thing to have it be the best result for you, but it's especially true when it comes to that Medicaid realm is what I'm picking up.
Perfect example of the Social Security example that you brought up is, I can't tell you how many times the widow benefit and the spousal benefit
Yep,
gets
totally
confused,
mixed up.
where the spousal benefit is where, let's imagine that you're married, you have kids, working, paying in the Social Security, both of you, and you get to a point where, maybe one spouse is now the breadwinner. They're the one working full time, and the other spouse doing arguably the just as important job, if not more important job, of taking care of the household and raising and taking care of the kids. So clearly, in that example, you're going to have one spouse who's paid more into Social Security than the other. So you start to get closer to your full retirement ages, and that is a term that's defined by the Social Security Administration. And for a lot of you, it might be 67 years old. It might be 66 in some months, but let's just go off 67. So you're getting closer to 67. So maybe you're late 50s, maybe you're 60 and you're right on the cusp of retirement, cutting the corporate cord. So you're like, you know what? We're going to start looking at these Social Security benefits. So you log into SSA.gov and you look at what your projected Social Security payment is to be when you file at full retirement age.
Yeah.
And back to that example, one spouse is going to have a much higher amount, the one that paid more into Social Security throughout their working years, and the spouse who was at home with the kids is likely going to have a lower amount. That is where that spousal benefit can come in, which is
Right. Basically, the lower earning spouse is promised that at full retirement age, if that's when they claim, so
Alex,
everything comes off of that.
Let's
that
imagine you
age.
and I are married. Okay.
Right.
All right.
Okay.
So you and I are married. You are the higher income earner.
Okay.
So you get your Social Security benefit. Let's just say it's $3,000.
So full retirement age 67, it's $3,000. What that means is that when you turn 67 and file, the other spouse,
Me, in this example,
your benefit would be $1,500 or more. So more if it calculated out to higher, there would be no spousal. But if your personal benefit was only going to be, say, $800, what would happen is you wouldn't get the $800. You'd actually get $1,500. Now, if you file at an age that's not full retirement age, those things get adjusted somewhat.
So if you filed at 67 and let's say I filed at 65,
right?
In that example, I would not be getting $1,500.
You would not get $1,500, but you would be getting more than what your personal calculated benefit is.
I would still be getting the spousal benefit.
It just would be reduced for filing early.
The number would be reduced, which, by the way, even if I was not eligible, let's imagine you and I were never married in this example, I'm just on my own. That makes sense because if I filed at full retirement age, I'd get that full amount that Social Security says I'm entitled to. But if I filed at 65, I'm going to get a reduced amount.
Exactly.
So it works the same how you manage that spousal benefit, which is extremely important to have a strategy around how you file, especially when you're married and there is that spousal benefit involved where there's a big there's a big age gap.
A big age gap makes a difference too.
Well, and this could also apply to
and then that comes
delaying.
back to that survivor benefit. That's a big part of your strategy is remember when one of you passes away, the larger of the two checks continues, but it needs to be big enough to compensate for the fact that one of them does stop. I mean, I've had people that I've, met or talked to that end up in a situation where they're like, what do you mean I don't get to keep both checks? My costs didn't go down. You don't get to keep both checks.
Yeah, because, I mean, that is the theory, right? Where we have a loss of life in your household that those fixed costs would maybe get cut in half because
not by much.
No, probably not. Probably not. But then that also helps you look at these strategies through two different lenses, right? So let's look at our scenario that, we're married. You are the higher income earning spouse. You get a higher benefit at full retirement age. And Alex, like you've said before many times, that Social Security bases if you file early or delay, meaning if you file early, you're going to get a reduction. But that reduction is based on your full retirement age amount. So if you're going to get $3,000 a month and then you take it at 66, that's an 8% reduction. You take it at 65, another 8%.
6.
Yeah, okay,
Reductions
6. Yep.
are 6.
So then you get to, 6%. So you could file as early as age 62.
Correct. But then you're only going to get 70% of the amount you would get if you waited to age 67.
So now it also works on the other side,
right.
Where if you delay, so maybe I could take it at 68, 69, or 70. Don't take it past 70 because that's when it stops increasing, right?
Yep, so just go get it.
So in this example, you could look at this as a potential strategy, which could be valid where, hey, if I'm the if we know that in our situation that Social Security is making up such a huge percentage of our fixed income,
and we need it to be as much as possible.
And then if there is a loss of life, like, then things really start to look, there's a lot of pressure on the success of the retirement plan. Maybe it does make sense for that higher incoming earning spouse to delay maybe all the way to 70 to maximize that benefit. And then the lower income earning spouse, maybe file it early as age 62 just to turn it on, because your benefit's small anyways. Maybe turn it on now just so you're getting some level of cash flow in those earlier years. And then, delaying that Social Security benefit till age 70 is going to give you that higher benefit for the higher income earning spouse. And if they, maybe there's a known health issue, right? Where maybe longevity is just not in the cards, then that widow benefit is going to leave that higher benefit to the surviving spouse.
Well, and this also, keep in mind that higher benefit, when it gets cost of living increases, those increases, although the percentages are the same, the dollars are more.
Explain that.
So 10% of $100 is $10. 10% of $700 is $70.
Yes.
It makes a difference.
No, it certainly does. And that's why it's important to gauge what are the costs going to be? Like, what is the baseline necessity budget that you need? And you probably have a quality of life component on top of that, but then you got to put the headwinds that the cost of those things go up every year. You can't be naive and think that the dollar today is going to be worth $1 in 10 years. It's like, no, that purchasing power of that dollar today is probably going to be significantly reduced. And that's inflation for you. Again, this is The Real Money Pros. Phone lines are open. Call us 979-59-MONEY. That is 979-596-6639. Or send us a text message. We got to take a break. We'll be right back.
Make this year that you work smarter, not harder, with Ataraxis. As your strategic partner, Ataraxis becomes an
979-596-6639. Welcome in California. We'll welcome in Chicago. I know in the past, some areas were picking up our show delayed, and that just had to do with logistics of the program. But we were able to get everything lined up. So now I think if we're not live in every single market, I think we're pretty like 90%. So that's the idea. And really the benefit of us being live, in my opinion, is that we can interact. We can take your questions live. We can put our brains together and logic this thing through, or you can send us a text message. I mean, you can call us, text us, whatever. And it's great for the community, because I would say this, that if you have a question about something, I guarantee that someone else out there listening has ran into that same situation. So again, like in this 3-hour program, the first hour we were talking about Medicaid, the long-term care benefits, and the surprises. There are some surprises that I walked away with there of how certain assets can be exempt versus other not. How having a living revocable trust could potentially mess up that whole plan that you're doing through Medicaid. How an intentional divorce
does not work. Don't do it. Even if the attorney says it does, they're actually incorrect. We learned a whole bunch of stuff.
And how if you're trying to get Medicaid set up on your own, that whole process from application could take about a year. Also, how they offer in-home care.
Yes.
And let's talk about why we're talking about this, because generally speaking, that while you're alive, you're rocking and rolling, you're working, doing delayed gratification, and the reality is at some point we're going to arrive at health starts to deteriorate. I've seen it throughout my family. I'm sure many of you have seen it. Alex, I know you've seen it as well. Our clients have certainly seen it. So been involved in a lot of situations where you have someone who comes up upon a health event as they age.
Yes.
And the big concern for that person or their kids or their family is, how do we cover the finances on this? We do not want the cost. It's a lot like early retirees, where they say, I'd love to retire at 59.
How do I cover health insurance?
But health insurance is so expensive that all my money, all of my retirement money is going to be going to healthcare, and my employer covers it. So
I guess I'll work another 6 years.
I'm working another 6 years, right? And it's like, well, okay, I don't disagree, right? Okay, but let's just dive into this and see how this would all shake out. Are you aware of the advanced premium tax credit? The advanced premium, what? It's part of the Affordable Care Act, and it's tied to your income. And if your income can be set up in ways where your MAGI is below a certain threshold, you can get a tax credit which can offset your health care costs.
Right.
wow, I did not know that. And by the way, even if that's not the case, then that healthcare cost is only going to need to cover for so many years. So let's see how those distributions really would affect your overall plan over the long-term planning based on your wants, wishes, desired, and how long your money needs to last you. How about just put that whole breakdown together, that cash flow analysis and growth analysis together to see, well, even if you are paying full pop for healthcare, can you still make it? And if those numbers look good, then
you got a choice.
Then you got a choice. But then again, that choice is pretty nice to have. Of like, well, okay, I see that feels really good, but I still would like to work. But hey, at least you're working by choice. So if you go in there and your boss just, it's just that day, and you just wipe those in, you know what? I'm out. And you know that it's not going to have a cataclysmic effect on the success of your retirement.
Now, one of the things I do want to bring up is a lot of times when I meet with people and we're doing this planning for retirement and building the plan up so that we know what we can get in income, and they tell me what they think they can live on versus what they're currently bringing home, I'm going to challenge it. And I think that it would be beneficial for a lot of people what if you just the 2 years before you retire have your paychecks direct deposit into an investment account, have your investment account put your paycheck into your checking account and the amount you say you're really going to use and need in retirement, and is that a realistic amount before you pull the trigger and you don't have a choice?
That's actually a pretty thoughtful way to go, because I will say this. You hear this term retirement. It's like, well, what does that actually mean? Is that like commercial of the two people walking on the beach and like, they're going to Boston, they're like on the sailboat, whatever. It's like, okay, maybe that's the reality for some people, but this term retirement, in my opinion, really comes like you're going from, that source of income, you're cutting the corporate cord, and then in theory, you're getting out of this accumulation phase, and you're in this decumulation phase.
And it feels different. You've made your own paycheck. And so now it feels, you're no longer going to be saving. So if you're taking, it's what are you taking home versus what are you going to need? Because you're not putting into the retirement plan anymore.
So now you get into the logistics of what does that actually look like? Because let's imagine that for the past 2 decades, maybe even more, it's like, okay, you look at that whole balance sheet and you're like, all right, I got some money inside of a Roth IRA. I got some money in a pre-tax IRA. My wife has money in a Roth and pre-tax IRA. We also got this 401k, and then we got, this rental property, and then we got, this cash, and then we also have this non-qualified investment. It's like, okay, like how are we actually going to pull from, and like which one's going to be taxes? And then before I was just getting a W-2, and that was the only tax thing that I had to report, maybe some dividend income, and that was it. But now that I no longer have the W-2 and I start pulling money from my IRA, that's a 1099-R. And then how do I handle with tax withholding with that? Do I withhold too much, too little? Do I pay quarterly? Like
so many questions.
The legit, like. And again, I'm not saying all this to make it sound like it's just some giant beast that can't be slain. No, these things are they're not complicated, but there's just way more logistical moves that are different than what you've been used to for the past 2 decades or more.
Right.
And that in and of itself makes the whole planning of it and like I appreciate that bringing that up, Alex, of like, okay, 2 years out, this is what that flow is actually going to look like. It's going to be coming.
How's it feel?
It's going to flow from this investment account to your bank account, which then you go and spend.
Yeah.
So
and what if you turn it on once a month and you're used to getting paid every 2 weeks? What do we have to do so that this is sustainable, works for you, and is comfortable? And we know that when you turn off that regular paycheck, you truly are getting the amount of income that will give you the retirement you're looking for.
Yeah, I will say probably the biggest change I think is just the change in how the taxes are approached, because when you're W-2,
it's all taxed.
It is, but you're also withholding, right?
Yep.
So like just the logistic of covering that tax bogey, like your net paycheck is it's net, because some of it may be going to the state, depending on what state you live in, and then some of it's going to the Fed, right? And your
FICA taxes.
Yeah, and your FICA taxes. This isn't complicated stuff. But then when you start to look at these other sources of where you're pulling money from, it's important to know the purpose of each account. Number one, how the account is structured from an investment standpoint to figure out, okay, which account is serving its purpose in either generating passive income through dividends, or that's my liquidity bucket of money that I'm going to pull from. And is it going to be pre-tax, meaning, okay, if I know I pull money out, that's going to be taxable. So how do I look at that from a standpoint of, do I do withholding? Do I not do withholding? How much? How does this affect?
Yeah.
Like, it's just important to keep these things in mind when you're approaching retirement.
Absolutely.
And I think that could be lost because not only is it that inertia change where you've been doing something for so long in the same way, so that change can't be overstated in my opinion, just in and of itself. And then you add these other pieces onto it. So again, you're entering this beautiful season of life, right? It's just a new season. So make sure that season I would say it's training camp, right?
There you go.
You go to training camp for that upcoming season, so you're well prepared. So you don't hit the field game one and you pull a hamstring, and it's like, oh man, my career's over, right? I guess that's the best analogy I can give you. Phone lines are open 979-59-MONEY. That is 979-596-6639. You can also send us a text message. This is The Real Money Pros. Apollon Wealth Management has transformed the way our team delivers financial advice. With their support, we're more money. That is 979-596-6639. You can call us, send us a text message to that line. You can email us, Jeremiah@therealmoneypros.com, Alex@therealmoneypros.com. We will answer your question live on air if you allow us, or if you want an answer behind the scenes, you will get an answer from one of the fiduciary financial advisors here in our team. We're a money show. We're not here to sell anything. We're sponsor driven. Visit therealmoneypros.com. Please get access to our wonderful sponsors. You can get access to our educational content, our videos. We're here to give you education. Period. End of story. The more education you have,
better consumer you are.
the better consumer you are, and you're just armed with tools to make better decisions.
Yeah,
that's it.
sure.
And then if you need some clarification on some certain strategies that we may have talked about, well, that's why we leave the channels of communication wide open for you. So if you're like, dang it, I'd like to call, but I got to go to my kid's baseball game right now, or whatever the case is, well, we're here every Saturday. At the same time, same place. So it also works. But you can also reach out to us during the week as well.
Just not on the phone line.
Not on the phone line,
You
correct.
would need to send the email
You
or
can do
through
it-
the website.
Or you can do a text message or the website too, meaning we got ways that you can contact us. So again, we have a network of great fiduciary advisors across the country.
Yeah.
So again, if you want someone you want that local presence face to face, you definitely have that there as well for you. Alex, so we were talking about Social Security strategies, how these potential movements can change on Social Security. You know, we talked about a little bit about the long-term care and Medicaid side of things, but we're specifically with Social Security, and we're looking at these various filing strategies. At what age do you think it's important to start looking into this?
So I think it's worth having a discussion around age 60. And I think it's also really important to realize that what you decide at one point in time doesn't mean it's the right answer 3 years down the road, because maybe the circumstances have changed. The other thing is people sometimes misunderstand because they hear if you make too much money, then it reduces your benefit, right? That's only if you file early. Once you hit full retirement age, which for most people now is 67 or 66 in a few months, you can earn as much as you want, and it doesn't reduce your Social Security. So,
And that's if you're still working, right?
Right.
Like through actual self-employment or W-2 income.
correct.
Got it.
So some sort of income that also pays Social Security tax. If you are getting, with a couple of exceptions, there's a few state pensions or different pensions that mess with it. But in general, pension payments, money out of an IRA, rental income, those don't affect your Social Security benefit for reduction purposes prior to full retirement age.
And again, I think that age 60 makes a lot of sense, because especially if you're still working.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, obviously you're still paying into Social Security. So meaning if you're looking at this at age 50 and you still plan on working for that decade, that estimate that they're giving you, it's likely going to be different. So, and again, you know, you can file it as early as age 62. So I agree with that 2-year out mark probably makes a lot of sense. Again, assuming you want to file at age 62.
And you may sit down at age 60 and be like, yeah, there's no point doing it early. I'm going to keep working till Medicare age at least. I'll take it at 70 and my spouse will take it at 67. But then continue to revisit it periodically.
And we can talk about this too, where a big question that gets brought up is, what do you think about me filing early?
Because it's going to go away.
That, right, which we can talk about. Like, I'll be the first one to admit, when you look at Social Security, the conversation, or like, you'll see those headlines that the Social Security Trust Fund is going to not run dry, but like a lot of times those headlines are like, wait, what? And you read through it.
Sensationalized
A little bit. I forget what year it is, but basically it said that it wouldn't be able to pay the full benefit.
Right,
so I
like
think
80% or
like
70%.
Like 70% or 80%. So again, that conversation around Social Security, it's always about the inputs or the outputs.
Yep.
Meaning it's, okay, let's increase Social Security tax. Let's increase the wage limit at which is subject to Social Security tax. All of that.
Yeah.
Or it's the outputs, meaning,
we'll reduce them.
We'll reduce them, or we'll push out the full retirement age.
Yep, which is what they did before.
There's never a conversation around, well, how about the actual investments inside of the Social Security fund? Because if you look at actually what it's invested in, U.S. Treasuries,
we were all running to invest in U.S. Treasuries because the rate's so high.
That performance is not going to keep up with just inflation on its own or the sheer demand, like meaning the people who are relying on Social Security versus the amount of money going in. There's a disconnect. That investment performance is never going to make it up, right? So the reality is, I would say the reality, like my take, and Alex, you probably agree with me on this as well, and we've talked about this before, is that Social Security is probably not going away. It's a giant political football that keeps getting punted down the road.
Yeah, until they don't have a choice, nobody's going to fix it.
So many people, I mean, when I say so many people, we're talking about, 50% of retirees in America right now, it is their sole source of retire. Like that is their only lifeline in retirement. It's the only thing that they're getting, right? And then you look at the people on top of that where it's
disability, and that's it.
That or Social Security makes up 50% or more of their Social Security lifeline.
That's a really large number as well.
It's a huge number. So I do think that they'll find a way to make it work. They'll find a way. Interesting, I did see that there was some legislation that was being proposed where they would they do an offshoot. They wouldn't actually take the funds within the Social Security Trust. They would almost it'd be like a branch off that would be funded with external dollars, which would then be invested in the U.S. stock market or maybe internationally, or maybe run like an actual pension fund to kind of shore up that Social Security Trust fund, which, hey, I mean, that's how a lot of pensions operate. If you think about it, it's not too dissimilar from our investment philosophy where you need liquidity for the money that you need right in front of you. You need a source of income to replenish that distribution rate, and then you're going to have money for the long term that you're not going to touch for 10 or more years.
Yeah, that can help with inflation.
And that would likely fix it. So again, so I would debunk that if there's a real concern. But hey, if that is a legitimate fear that you have and you want to make sure that your retirement plan works around it, then come up with a plan. Come up with a plan to where you know without a doubt if Social Security just stopped, that it would still work. And maybe that means reducing spending, maybe it means saving more, whatever the case is, right? No, the other piece that I would say is the taxation of Social Security. So this is another big piece that I hear from a lot of clients in my office where obviously the Trump administration was hanging their hat heavily that they were going to remove taxes on Social Security. Right. Which did not happen. It was a bit of a lofty goal, and I'm not getting political here. I'm just saying that a lot of people had that assumption based on what was being championed on the campaign trail. The reality is Social Security is still taxable, meaning if you are receiving it, you're going to get a tax document from Social Security that you have to put in your tax return. Now, how it's taxed comes down to what all your other sources of income is, right?
Yep.
Now, Social Security, it's either not going to be taxed at all. 50% of your benefit will actually flow through as taxable income on your return, all the way up to 85%.
Right.
So it's still the case. They did not do away with taxation of Social Security.
Nope.
So if you're receiving Social Security last year or you're starting to receive Social Security this year, it will be included in with all of your other taxable income. How it's taxed and if it's taxed is all based on what your total income, what the rest of the income looks like. Now, what we did talk about is one thing that they did implement is that enhanced senior deduction. Mm-hmm. So if you're 65 or older, you get on top of your normal standard deduction, you get that enhanced senior deduction, which is $6,000 per person.
Yep, for 4 years.
For 4 years. Now, that was a question I was going to ask you. So that's only in place for 4 years?
Only through 28.
It wasn't set permanently?
25, 26, 27, 28.
Okay, which, again, is important to take into consideration for your tax planning, for your future. Maybe if you have a lot of money in a pre-tax IRA, and if you know that, hey, if I'm married filing jointly and I could keep my modified adjusted gross income under $150,000, I know that I'm going to get that additional $12,000 off the top. Maybe I should look at recognizing some more income, maybe selling something and getting the capital gain because you know it's going to be efficient from a tax standpoint. Roth conversions. meaning that $12,000 you're going to, in theory, you're going to have to play with for the next few years, which in theory could give you some efficient tax planning over the long run. So again, taxation of Social Security, still there. When we're looking at the spousal widow benefit, we've already talked about that. As far as game planning that and Social Security strategies, it just really depends on your situation. The one thing I was going to bring up is file at age 62.
Okay.
File as early as possible. Take that money and invest it because the market returns are going to beat the increase that Social Security would give me.
This one kind of makes my hair rise up on end.
Please.
I am personally, and I know that this can be argued on both sides fairly, but personally, I do not feel that that's a valid theory. One, because every year that you delay filing or because you've taken it early, you get automatically a 6% gain in your amount. So you're going to have to definitely earn more than that, plus whatever you're paying in taxes on it. Plus now you've restricted your income if you're still trying to work. Most people at that point don't want to take the risk that it would need to have in order to know they're going to exceed it enough on the good years and on average.
And one thing that if you take that route, there's so many variables. Like you need some things to happen, right? For it to work on how you see it, right? Which, hey, if it works, undeniable, right? But if it doesn't,
I think it's a big risk.
Then you're just subject to so many variables versus if you just took that increase that's already there. And
it's in place.
It's in place. Your forecasting can be there. You can do your vesting around it. Probably not a bad idea versus that protocol. Because I think if there's one case that a lot of retirees like is some degree of certainty. Get it where you can. We got to take a break. We'll be right back.
Businesses today face a barrage of challenges. They hunt for top talent, the search for the right benefits package, and the ever-rising
time to get it answered. 979-59-MONEY. That phone line and text line again is 979-596-6639. I'm Jeremiah Bates. She is Alexandra Lundgren. We are fiduciary financial advisors here for you every Saturday, same time, same place. Let's talk about rental properties. Few interesting meetings that I've had with a couple clients over the past, I'd say 2 months or so, where I think this is a case for a lot of individuals where they bought some rental properties. They bought them at a great price. Those things have appreciated in value like they've gone to the moon.
Yeah.
And they were little cash flow machines, but now they're to the point where they want to unwind from it. One client, because this thing is just a pain in the neck.
Yeah. Sometimes you just don't want to be the landlord anymore.
The 3 T's of being a landlord: toilets, tenants, and taxes. Right?
Right.
So again, you look at that and it's like, okay, and I have this client, it's a thorn in his side, pain in the butt. It's not really net cash flowing too much to him at this point. There's just a lot of expenses that are now involved. And he's just like, what can I do with this? Other client, they actually have a tangible financial target. Like they need the liquidity out of this. And it's interesting because one of my clients, the one who's having his thorn in his side, the CPA that he works with advocated against it and just painted with such a broad brushstroke, saying, "Well, if you sell it, then all your profits are going to go to taxes." I'm like, okay, all your profits? I'm like, you're getting taxed at
100%.
Yeah, I'm like, you're getting taxed at 100% on this asset. I'm like, well, let's actually look into this. So let's dive in. We dove into it. It's like, okay, what'd you purchase it for? That is your basis. Okay.
Yeah.
Did you do any significant capital improvements to the property? Yes. Okay. That'll increase your basis even more. Meaning when they sell it and they get that net amount, whatever that difference is between that net amount they sold it for and that basis plus capital improvements, that's their taxable gain. And that is what they're going to pay taxes on. And by the way, that is going to be subject to capital gains rate, not ordinary income rates. So that's usually a more efficient rate. You're either paying 0%, 15%, all the way up to 20%. Now, if you recognize that capital gain, that'll add into your modified adjusted gross income. So you want to look at how that would affect like your Medicare premiums and Social Security taxation and all that. But again, just something to pay attention to. And you may run into a net investment income tax of 3.8%, depending on where your income falls again. And then also how your state views that capital gains tax income. Okay, it sounds like a lot, but bottom line is it's not going to be taxed at 100%.
No.
Okay, so I just want to put that out there because I think a lot of people are running into this where they have a highly appreciated piece of real estate, just where we've seen the real estate market go, and you see that gain on paper, but that real estate, that single family rental property, whatever it is, it's not liquid. You can't tap into it.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, you maybe take some leverage on it, maybe get some type of loan against it or whatever, but then you got to pay interest on it and all that. So again, in these two cases,
and don't not take gains just because you're scared of taxes. I mean, because maybe there's something else you want to do with it.
Sometimes ripping the tax Band-Aid off makes sense. But let's imagine this is a scenario where, hey, like I had another client where, again, talked about this in the hour before, but I had a client where they have a rental property that's out of state. They only have someone in there maybe 6 months out of the year. He said after taxes, insurance, and just the small maintenance that we do on it, we're actually losing a little bit of money. Like maybe breaking even, actually losing a little bit of money. Then you could be listening like, well, why do they have it? It's like, well, when they originally...
That's kind of the discussion though, isn't it?
Well, when they originally purchased it, they liked the idea because they were taking multiple trips down to Arizona. So they're like, well, this is a good property, da-da-da-da-da. Like, we can take care of it when we're down there because we're doing frequent trips. Well, those trips have stopped. They haven't been down there in like 2 years. So he's like, but I talked to and this is where the CPA said, well, don't sell it because if you sell it, all the money's going to go to taxes, right? It's like, okay. So let's just imagine a scenario where that taxable gain is significant, where it would cause a significant bogey across the board of your liquidity, where you're like, I want to keep what I've earned. I don't want to send a majority of it to the state and federal for taxes. You can do a 1031 exchange.
Right.
And a 1031 exchange, and Alex, if you got any color or commentary out of this, please do. But a 1031 exchange is essentially where you can sell that said property. You never take receipt of those dollars.
Nope, you have to be really careful about this.
You work with a title company, a qualified intermediary, professionals in the space that help guide it along so it's all smooth, reported accurately. It's relatively straightforward. But you can do a 1031 exchange and you can go maybe buy another rental property that is closer to you or something that's not as heavy maintenance, or you can do a 1031 exchange into a Delaware statutory trust.
Right, which then you can even diversify it again among different types of property ownership, whether it's parking lots or self-storage
industrial,
yes,
storage,
or still even,
student housing.
Different kinds of rentals. It'll still potentially generate a little bit of income. Is it as much as when you do it yourself? Not typically. Of course, if it's not going well to begin with, it might be better.
You're probably looking at like 5-6%, like on an annual basis. But
now you don't have any of the headaches,
and you don't have the headaches. And if
you didn't pay the taxes,
you didn't pay the taxes.
You get the step up when you die.
You get the step up in basis when you die. So whoever inherits that investment, then they get the basis based on the value of when you passed away. So in theory, if they were to turn around and sell it down with the Delaware Statutory Trust, you might be running some liquidity issues. So
there is a time you got to hold it. But there's also the really cool thing is, what if you own a property jointly with somebody, right? And somebody needs to sell, so you've got to sell it, and you don't have enough in your share to go buy a new rental right now. You can do that with the Delaware Statutory Trust because a lot of the minimums are smaller. You can put it in there, wait your 7 to 10 years, take the liquidity event, and maybe now it is large enough to go buy a physical one if you want. Or because it's still eligible for a 1031, you can go back into a physical property that you manage, or you can put it into another one.
Well, in this case, the Delaware Statutory Trust, in my mind, makes a lot of sense. It's like you don't want to pay the big tax bogey.
Yeah.
You don't like the headache of this thing, and it's not cash flowing, and you would like it to be, like, meaning he's got a significant amount of money wrapped up into this thing that's just sitting.
It'll turn it into cash flow without the tax bill.
It'll turn it into cash flow for him. I mean, rough estimates that we're looking at, it's like very conservative. It'd be about $24,000 a year that you don't have to take any active management on, and you don't take the tax hit.
And you don't even have to pay the depreciation recapture tax of 25%.
It's a valid strategy that's there, meaning if you need liquidity for whatever reason, and the other nice thing about a 1031 exchange is that you don't need the rollover, like you don't need to exchange the entire gain.
Correct.
You can actually hold some back. So how you would look at that, like what you would look at is this. Okay, if I sold that rental property and after all the recapture of everything, yada, 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 yeah, it's going to be a giant tax bill. But I do need some liquidity. It would be really nice to have some dollars held back, just to pad my liquid bucket or whatever the case is, right? Which I can certainly appreciate. It's like, hey, we want to buy something cool. We want to go on that great trip. We want to gift the kids. We want to help the kids with the down payment. But like, we can't do that with all this equity tied up in this illiquid asset. So you could do that 1031 exchange, but you can earmark a portion of that gain to not be a part of that 1031 exchange. Now, that amount would be subject to capital gain. You got to be clear of that. But depending on the amount that you pinpoint, it's going to be significantly less than if you took the whole thing. So these 1031 exchange, not complicated, relatively straightforward. It's a great strategy and path to help you unwind or transition out of highly appreciated real estate and not recognize that big tax bogey.
For sure.
And that Delaware statutory, you could be listening to this, it's like, okay, I get it. I'm just going from one rental property pain in the butt to another rental property pain in the butt and just not pay taxes on that pain in the butt. Like, that doesn't really solve my problem here.
Yeah.
That's where that Delaware statutory trust can be put in place, where it's like, okay, you still get all those tax benefits, and then it's just passive. You own that Delaware statutory trust, and that fund, if you will, just sends you, generally speaking, on a monthly basis, it'll send you those income payments. But again, keep in mind the liquidity issues on that, but it's not too dissimilar from a rental property. You're not going to be able to shave off a part of that and sell it for liquidity purposes. So it's just a balance. Where are you getting your income? Where are you getting your liquidity? Where are you getting that long-term growth? And how does this fit into your overall picture? And again, what is your time worth? What is your time, your stress, and your anxiety worth when it comes to rental properties? Sometimes those things are great little income machines, and sometimes
you're done.
Sometimes they get over that hump, and it's no longer serving its purpose, depending on where you're at in life. So again, you got valid strategies, whether it's rental properties, the Social Security, or it's around Medicaid and long-term care planning. Strategies are abundant. Find out how they fit and work for you. Again, this is The Real Money Pros. We are taking an extended 6-day break. We will be back next week. Same time, same place. Thank you, Alex. Have a great weekend.
The Real Money Pros is hosted by Brian Wiley and other team members of Tree City Advisors of Apollon. Tree City Advisors of Apollon is a DBA of Apollon Wealth Management, an SEC-registered investment advisor and affiliate of the Real Money Pros. The Real Money Pros and Tree City of Apollon are not affiliated with any of the companies or non-advisor professionals participating on this program. Ataraxis PEO and Apollon Wealth Management are financial sponsors of the Real Money Pros. Additionally, Apollon receives advisory fees for these sponsors and or their representatives for investment advice. Log into therealmoneypros.com to contact the host for advice, show archives, educational material, and more. This program